Of Tzadi Vav Amud Aleph, we'll begin at Tzadi Hey Amud Beis, 9 lines from the bottom. Lema b'Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak Kamiflagi. We had a machlokes in the Mishnah between the Tanna Kama and Rabban Gamliel, if you can bring the tefillin in one pair at a time or two at a time. Let us say the machlokes that they're arguing with is whether we accept the halacha, the din of Rav Yitzchak, of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. If we accept what Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak said, that there's makam laniach, 2 pair of tefillin on the rosh and 2 pair on the arm, and therefore it's considered a tachshit, it's considered a noi even with 2 pairs. So let's say that that's the machlokes. Meaning, then what we're saying over here now is that they both, Tanna Kama and Rabbi Gamliel, both agree that Shabbos is lav zman tefillah, and the heter, therefore, to bring in the tefillin is not because of the mitzvah, that you become the mitzvah, it's because it's a tachshit. And let us say, therefore, that that's a machlokes. Is it considered a tachshit with 1 and not 2, or even with 2? Do we accept the halacha of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak that there's 2 malkam for 2 pair on both the yad and shel rosh, and therefore they're both considered to be a tachshit, or not? So let us say that there's the machlokes, the Tanna Kama, Leslie, Rav Shmuel, Rav Yitzchak, and therefore he says you're only allowed to bring in 1 pair. Rabban Gamliel is the Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, and there he does hold the Rav Gamliel, and therefore you're allowed to bring in 2 pair. Perhaps I'll tell you that's not the machlokes. The Kuli Almi is the Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Perhaps I'll tell you that everybody holds of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, and there's a malkam on the rosh for 2 tefillin, there's a malkam on the hand for 2 tefillin. But the issue over here is, what is the heter to bring in tefillin on Shabbos? So perhaps I'll tell you, v'hacha b'Shabbos man tefillin kamifkali. The machlokes is whether on Shabbos there is a time, it's a time for tefillin, whether you're mekayim the mitzvah tefillin on Shabbos, and therefore the Tanna Kama holds that the heter to bring in the tefillin is because of the mitzvah, not because it's considered a tachshit. The Tanna Kama Savar Shabbos man tefillin, he holds that the heter to bring in the tefillin is only because of the kiyum mitzvah, and for the kiyum mitzvah you're mekayim the mitzvah with 1 pair, so you're only allowed to bring in 1 pair. And even more than that is that if you brought on 2 pair, you'd be over bal taisit. So therefore, the Tanna Kama says you're only allowed to bring in 1 pair. Rav Gamliel Savar Shabbos lav zman tefillin. And Rav Gamliel holds that no, Shabbos is not zman tefillin, and therefore he holds the heter to bring in the tefillin is not based on the mitzvah; it's based on that it's a tachshit, and therefore, since there's malkam laniach 2 pair, it's a tachshit for 2 pair, and therefore you're allowed to bring in both. And there's no bal taisiv over here because it's not Shabbos lav zman tefillin. By saying, I'll tell you even another way of understanding it. The Kuli Alma Shabbos man tefillin. Really, I'll tell you that everyone holds that Shabbos is man tefillin. It is a man tefillin, and as we'll see, and they both hold that it's also there's a heter to bring in if it's a tachshit. So why does the Tanna Kama say that you're only allowed to bring 1 pair? The machlokes is if you're machaven, if you have to be machaven rather to be yoytz of the mitzvah. Are you yoytz of the mitzvah with dafka, with kavanah, or even without kavanah? Tanna Kama says boy kavanah. Tanna Kama holds. Now Rashi is geiris not like we have it in the Gemara. Rashi is geiris that Tanna Kama savar mitzvahs ain't shrichus kavanah. That's how he's good. The Tanna Kama holds mitzvahs don't need kavanah. So therefore, the Tanna Kama says, since Shabbos is man tefillin, even if you're not mechaven, it's the mitzvah. Now, if you put on 2, you'll be over bal taisiv, so you can't take 2. So therefore, you're restricted to 1. Rav Gamliel savar loy by kavanah, and Rashi's gear over here is Rav Gamliel savar boy kavanah. You need kavanah. And therefore, Rabbi Gamliel holds you're not going to be over bal taisiv, because unless you're mechaven for the mitzvah, there's no bal taisiv, but it is a tachshit, so therefore you can carry 2. Now, the Tanna Kama would also hold that you can carry 2 if the purpose, because he does hold it that there's a tachshit, that it is a tachshit, and therefore theoretically could also carry 2, but Since he holds that mitzvah ain't strichos kavana, you're going to be mekayim the mitzvah regardless, and you're going to be over Baal Taisiv. So therefore, you're restricted to one. You can't carry two. Rav Chanan asks a kasha. He asks a kasha that the Russian in Masechet Sukkah says that you can put in additional hadassim. And when you have the Dalet Minim, you can put in additional hadassim because it's annoying. Because it's mahadar the Dalet Minim. And it's annoyed by doing it. And therefore, when you put it in, it's annoy, it's a tachshit, and it's mafkiyat from the mitzvah, and therefore, you're not over Baal Taisiv. So for Rav Chanan, why don't we say the same thing over here? If the Tanakama, we're saying Tanakama agrees that it's a tachshit, well, why don't we say that it's a tachshit, and therefore it's mafkiya from the mitzvah, and you're not over Baal Taisiv? Rav Chanan answers, he says, by the case of the hadassim, it is inherently a tachshit. It's a tachshit, you put it there to adorn it. So therefore, you're putting the additional ones over there. You're not mechavan for the mitzvah. Your kavanah, therefore, it's as if you're mechavan beferish for a tachshit, and it's mafkiyah from a mitzvah. There's no Baal Taisiv. But over here, the tefillin, even though we say it's a tachshit, but you wouldn't wear the tefillin if not for the fact that you want to save it, and you don't have an alternative carrying it on Shabbos, you wouldn't wear it. You're only wearing it because you can't carry it. So it's not inherently a tachshit. So therefore, we wouldn't say over here that it's mafkiyat from the mitzvah, because what it is oimir, if Shabbos is man tefillin, then its primary function would be for the mitzvah, not as a tachshit, and therefore there would be a Baal Taisiv. The Gemara says another alternative is the kuli amal says leibai kavana. That's the yaitz of the mitzvah. You don't need the kavana. But over here, the issue is to be over Baal Taisiv, you have to have specific kavana that you want to add to the mitzvah. The Tanakama Savar Lavar Mishum Baal Taisiv Leibai Kavana. You don't need kavana. Therefore, the Tanakama holds if you put on 2 pairs of tefillin and mela, you're going to be over Baal Taisiv, even if you're not machavan to be ma'isiv. Therefore, you're restricted to one. You need kavana, and therefore, if you're not mechavan to be ma'isiv, you can bring in 2. There's no Baal Taisiv. I'll say even another alternative that is virlan the Shabbos man tefillin. If we would hold the Shabbos man tefillin is the kuliyama loy lavar boy kavana v'loy lot says boy kavana, that you don't need kavana. Everyone agrees that you don't need kavana, and therefore, if Shabbos is man tefillin, therefore you would not be allowed to bring in 2 pair. But what is the machlekes over here is really Shabbos is laws man tefillin. But the question is, are you over Baal Taisiv if you put it on when it's not the Zman? Are you also over Baal Taisiv when it's not the Zman, even without Kavanah? Now, if he had Kavanah to be Maisiv too, but if the Torah says that there's Shabbos is Lavzman Tefillin, and he had Kavanah that nevertheless I want to put on Tefillin on this day, I want to add to my Chiyah, he certainly would be over Baal Taisiv. That's Zichar Baal Taisiv. Over here, we're saying that Shabbos is Lavzman Tefillin, and he did not have specific Kavanah to be over. Are you nevertheless over Baal Taisiv? So what's the machlekes? Tanakama Savar loy by Kavanah. Tanakama says you don't need Kavanah. The very fact that you're doing this mitzvah when the Torah says there is no mitzvah, you're adding to the mitzvah of the Torah. So there's Baal Taisiv, and therefore you're restricted, and you cannot wear 2. You can only wear 1. Rav holds no, that even the shlit is amana by kavana, and if you're not mechavan to be ma'isiv, there's no Baal Taisiv. That's why you can bring in 2. If that's the case, Rav Meir, the Tanakama, who we said is going according to Rav Meir, we said the Rashba said we attributed it to Rav Meir. So the Rav Meir zugechat namiloi. Well, then you shouldn't even be able to bring in 1. According to the Tanakama, you shouldn't even be able to bring in 1 pair because that in itself is Baal Taisiv. I'll ask you another kasha. Yashim b'shmini b'sukkah. If one sleeps in a sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, so it's lachar zmana. Sukkah is 7 days. It's Shmini Atzeres. Then Yilke should get malchus for Baal Taisiv. Now we know he doesn't. In fact, we say it's a seika d'yayim, but we mechuyev to be in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres and Chutz La'aretz, and How can you, even though it's lachar zmana, but even if it's loy by kavana, you're telling me there's bal taisif, there'd be a problem bal taisif. That's not the basis of the machlokes. It's like the previous terutzim that we said before. Now we were discussing whether Shabbos is man tefillin or not. Frank the Gemara, Uman shamat le Shabbos is man tefillin. Who's the Tana that holds that Shabbos is this man of tefillin? Our answer is Rabbi Kiva. The Tana is Rabbi Kiva. The Sanya we learn in the Brayse, Vishamar te'es hachuka hazois l'mo'adami yomim yomima. You should be careful to observe this chayk from time to time, from day to day. So, what does this mean? From which chayk is it talking about? And it says it's at the time when it comes from day to day. So we darshan that this chukah that it's talking about tefillin. And it says, mi yomim yomima, yomim v'loy leilos. So it says yomim, which means day and not night. Me yomim, and it says from day to day, me yomim v'loy kol yomim, probably Shabbos yom tovim, div Rav Yosef Galili. So that's what Rav Yosef Galili says, and therefore he says that tefillin, the mitzvah tefillin, is not noig at night, and it's not noig on Shabbos. But Rabbi Kiva says, Rabbi Kiva, Omer loy nemer chukazu ela l'inyan Pesach belvad. He said, no, the chayk that we're talking about here is not the mitzvah of tefillin. It's the korban Pesach. It's to keep the mitzvah of Pesach. And therefore, since what it's talking about is referring to keeping the mitzvah of Pesach for future generations, it's not talking about tefillin. There's no miyut that it's not noig on Shabbos. If you don't have a miyut to exclude it from Shabbos, Mela, it's included in Shabbos. So therefore, we're assuming that Rabbi Kiva holds that the mitzvah of tefillin is on Shabbos, and therefore the Tana is Rabbi Kiva. Frank the Gemara, how can you say that? We learned in the Mishnah Pesach Mila Mitzvah Essay that the mitzvah of Pesach, the Korban Pesach, and the mitzvah to Mila, it's a mitzvah Essay. It's not a lois Essay. It's not a lav. Let us say that that's not like Rabbi Kiva, because if Rabbi Kiva is saying that this pasuk of Hishomer, Rishamarta rather, Shamarta Sachuka Zois Lamodim Yomima is referring to the Korban Pesach, well then there should also be a lav involved. The Rabbi Kiva came to make a little bit Pesach. He says the pasuk is talking about Pesach. Lav Namika. There's also a loisase. Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Loi, Damar Avin Amar Rabbi Loi. Kol Malkum Shenemar Yishomar. It says Yishomar or Pen Vaal. Eina Ela Beloisase. When it says these words, it refers to a loisase, and over here it has the lashon of Hishomer. It says Vishamarta. It's a lashon of Hishomer, so there should be also a lav. So let's say this is not like Rabbi Kiva, where it says no. Afilu teim Rabbi Kiva Hishomer the lav. It says when it's Shomer, it says it in conjunction with something not to do, something that you shouldn't do. It refers to a lav and a chanami. But Hishomer the essay. But over here, it's referring to something that you should do, a positive action, not something that you shouldn't do. Therefore, the lashon of Hishomer in this context does not refer to a loisase. Therefore, it is consistent with Rabbi Kiva, even though Rabbi Kiva says that Korban Pesach is an essay and not a loisase, but the Hishomer in this context does not refer to a lav. Frank the Gemara v'Sava Rabbi Kiva Shabbos man tefillin. Who? How can you say that Rabbi Kiva holds Shabbos is man tefillin? About time you learn in the Brayse Rabbi Kiva Aimer Yachol Yaniach Adam tefillin v'Shabbos v'Yom Tovim. You might think that a person should put on tefillin on Shabbos and Yom Tov Tam and Lamer V'Hayol Hala Ois Al Yodcha, and it should be an ice on your arm. Tefillin is an ice. When is the mitzvah tefillin noyeg? That's when you need an ice. Mi shetzrichem ice. On those days that an ois, that a sign that we keep the mitzvahs of Hashem, that we are people that do the mitzvahs of Hashem, that's when you wear tefillin. Yatsu Elu, but those days, Yatsu Elu, Shein Guf an ois, where the day itself is an ois, Shabbos itself is an ois, Shabbos is an oisi. It's a bris that we have a bris that we are the Am Hashem, and we are faithful to Hashem. We don't need another ois, and therefore It's not a zman of tefillin, because Shabbos itself is inherently an ois. So therefore we see over here the Rabbi Kiva holds that over here that Shabbos is lav zman tefillin. Therefore, even though he doesn't exclude tefillin from the pasuk of Yomi Yomima, that he's referring to the Korban Pesach, but we have a different exclusion for Shabbos, for tefillin on Shabbos, from the over here the limit of ois, ois hal yodcha. You only wear tefillin on the days that an ois is required. Shabbos, an ois is not required. And there's much discussion in the Rishonim and the Paiskim. It says over here, the Lashon over here says, Yotzu Elu Shen Gufin Ois. It excludes those days that an ois is not required. So there is a discussion that excludes, therefore, Shabbos. It excludes Yontu. Does it exclude Chol HaMoed as well? On Chol HaMoed, is tefillin excluded from Chol HaMoed or not? And therefore, there's different discussions in the Paiskim and different minhagim. Some people have the minhag to wear tefillin on Chol HaMoed, and many people don't. Frek the Gemara, Elahai, so Zok the Gemara rather, Elahai Tanahu. The Tana, who's the Tana, therefore, that holds that Shabbos is man tefillin? Let us say it's the following, the Sanya, near Belayla. If a person is awake at night, Rotza Choylitz, if he wants, he can remove the tefillin, Rotza Maniach. If he wants, he can leave them on. Divrei Rabbi Yonasan. And Yonasan Akitoino Aimer, Ein Manichn tefillin Belayla. He holds a no. You don't wear tefillin at night. So therefore, Midalayla Tanakama is man tefillin. So Tanakama holds you could keep it on. Therefore, meaning what is the machlekes over here? That the Tanakama holds that Laila is man tefillin, that nighttime is man tefillin, and therefore you can leave them on. And therefore, Midalayla the Tanakama is man tefillin. Shabbos Name is man tefillin, and then Shabbos is also man tefillin. Just like the exclusion, if we don't exclude from the pasuk Yomim Yomima, that we don't exclude nighttime from it. So you see that he's not learning it as an exclusion, and therefore Shabbos is also not excluded. Since he's obviously learning that this pasuk does not exclude tefillin from night, therefore it doesn't exclude it from Shabbos either. Meaning, what is the machlekes over here? Now, the way Rashi and the Rosh elaborated on by the Rosh, the way they're learning over here is that the Tanakama holds that a near Belayla Rotza Choylitz, if he wants to remove the tefillin, if he wants meniach in this context doesn't mean put it on, it means leave it on. Meaning, l'kuli alma, there is an Isser d'Rabbanan to put on tefillin at night, Gzera Shem Yafiach Behem, and it's not covered for the tefillin. But the Tanakama holds that Laila is man tefillin. So therefore, if he's wearing it already, he can continue wearing it because there's a mitzvah tefillin at night. He shouldn't put it on, but if he's wearing it, he can continue wearing it. There's no mitzvah tefillin at night. And therefore he must remove the tefillin because of the Gzeira Hashem Yafiach Behem. So al Kolpanim we see the Tanakama holds that there's no mitzvah, that the Tanakama holds rather there's a mitzvah at night. If there's a mitzvah at night, therefore we're assuming there's a mitzvah on Shabbos as well, because he's not excluding night from the pasuk of Yomim Yomima. He would not exclude Shabbos either. The Gemara now rejects this. No, Dilma, maybe I'll tell you not that way. Dilma Sirle, maybe Tanakama holds Laila Zman Tefillinu, and Shabbos loves Zman Tefillinu. Maybe he holds that yes, it's true that Laila is man tefillin, but not Shabbos. Meaning that he agrees with Rabbi Kiva that Yomim Yomima is referring to Pesach. It's not referring to tefillin, and therefore there's no exclusion for the Laila from that pasuk. But there is an exclusion on Shabbos for a different reason, for the reason that Rabbi Kiva gives. Da Shamina Lila Rabbi Kiva, Da Omar, Laila's man tefillinu, and Shabbos loves man tefillinu, because that's what we see from Rabbi Kiva, that he says Yomi Yomim refers to the Korban Pesach. It doesn't refer to tefillin, so you don't have an exclusion from that pasuk on tefillin, but we do have an exclusion from the reasoning of ois, that Shabbos is a time where you do not need the ois of tefillin. And therefore, He does not, Rabbi Akiva does not have an exclusion for Laila, for nighttime, but he does have an exclusion for Shabbos. And similarly, this Tana Kama holds the same way like Rabbi Akiva, and therefore the exclusion is only for Shabbos and not for Laila. But Shabbos is excluded. So still, we're searching for the Tana that holds that Shabbos is man tefillin.